Live from Capitol Hill, it's Tuesday, the 28th of April, year of our Lord 2020. You're in the War Room on War Room Pandemic across the nation on the John Fredericks Radio Network on americasvoice.news. That is the streaming platform of the Trump Revolution. It's now channel 219 on the Dish Network, Newsmax TV, FM 99.1 and 103.9 in Chicago, and of course throughout the world on nexus.org, IRRS. And later in the day, subtitle in Mandarin to all the folks in China yearning to breathe free on G News and G Media. Compliments of the Guo Media News Organization. And also Facebook on our core site, about 50 Facebook sites, news sites, etc. So you can get it everywhere. We're ubiquitous, including on, Raheem, we're also a podcast. We go Spotify, Google,
We haven't
Apple.
done this in a while.
No, we haven't done it in a while. Just Stitcher,
SoundCloud.
Stitcher.
What's the one you like, Jason?
Audible, but I let my subscription
you like
lapse.
Luminary.
Oh, yeah, Luminary. No, that's the one
I think Jason's got warrants in Luminary. The over 6.7 million downloads now. The hottest podcast in the country. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller. We have death, famine, economic collapse, and war. But the good news is we're opening back up and rolling. I want to talk about these. Raheem, let's go back to statistics first. How many deaths do we have this morning as we talk about the opening of the country? Right, how close to 57,000 are we?
So we are at 56,805 deaths in the United States so far, a total of 1,011,408 cases.
Who was what reporter asked that question yesterday? Who was at the briefing?
It was Olivia Newsy.
Olivia Newsy. And is she at New York Magazine now? I think she's at New York.
She is at New York Magazine, yeah.
She's a feature writer there. Very good young writer. Was that question, I thought the president's answer was pretty solid. Was that a snarky question?
I think it was a very snarky question. And I actually like Olivia Newsy's writing.
She's a very good young writer.
It's thoroughly entertaining to read Olivia Newsy, but I think that was beneath her yesterday, asking the question of the president, if there is a president that presides over that many deaths in the country, more than the Vietnam War.
Give it what the question was. I know we don't have a poll, but just you don't have to pull it. How did she ask it?
She asked that. Does a president who presides over more deaths than the Vietnam War deserve to be president? And there are plenty of ways to ask that question that aren't snarky and designed just to provoke and get those, retweets, which is what I suspect that Olivia Newsy was after. She could have asked, where along the line do you think you could have improved in the response? How would you have reacted if you were running for president and there was a president who had presided over this? Lots of different ways you could have asked that question if you wanted to elicit a substantive answer along those lines. But the idea of emotionally invoking deaths and war in order to trigger the president live on stage, it doesn't provide any more information to the public, which is what journalists are supposed to do there, although 9 times out of 10 that's not true. And it doesn't move the ball in any way, shape or form. It doesn't push the issue forward.
So Jason, help me out here, because I've noticed now it's almost a caricature, because what we're trying to do, look, we're the most partisan guys in the world, right? We admit that. And that's why we started War Room Impeachment. We started this whole concept back in October because we didn't think the conservatives, and particularly the people on the right in the Trump movement, were focused enough on what was a looming cloud with that impeachment situation where Nancy Pelosi was just going to run the tables on him and permanently scar him to make the re-election very, very tough. Not remove him from office, but in the process. However, we've tried to handle this show from day one. We understand we're Trump guys, so we're always going to lean to that. But we've tried to be very even-handed. One of the things I've noticed in the media, and particularly things like Morning Joe, they're getting more and more. It's almost getting hysterical. The attacks, and someone like Olivia Newsy, who's excellent. She's like Daniel Lippman and some of these others. You see these young rising stars as far as their writing qualities going. I'm not saying they're reporting. These are good writers. Ask a question like that. In the way it's phrased, it's a very important element to get out to the president. He is a wartime president. Hey, you got casualties. How you think? And we're going to talk about the numbers changed, right? And the president talked about that. But to do that, it's almost like you want to score points with the Morning Joe crowd and look, even Rachel Maddow, I don't think is being hysterical, but some of the other elements of MSNBC and CNN, I think, is totally off the chain, where they should dominate the reporting, given their international structure, not only should they be the cutting edge of the pandemic part, they should tie in the economic and financial aspects also, which they don't do. And they're absolutely terrible in the geopolitics, and they're awful about the whole China element, about the investigation of the lab, WHO, Bill Gates. It's not just partisan. It's not just hyper-partisan. It's kind of like this parody of partisanship that the Trump hatred is so overwhelmed them, right? The Trump derangement syndrome, which I used to laugh at, but it's so inculcated, right? And I was the first guy to say, hey, these guys are the opposition party, but it's even more than that. They've taken it now to another step, like the Democrats can't handle this. And so the way they do this is detach. And yesterday, there's a very important – I think the president actually for the first time talked about the 70,000 – as we've talked about last week, somebody's got to update the model because you're going to be at 60 before kickoff. The first segment of the show, death, famine, economic collapse, and war. With all of that happening,
You forgot pestilence.
Pestilence is the pandemic. So I got pestilence, right? I got a plague, but in the middle of that, things go on. Where the whole first couple of segments here is about opening up, in spite of that. Right, but the president does, as we've been saying before kickoff being May 1st, is basically kickoff. In the pregame, we're already past the number for and the president talks about this. But the point is that the media is it's beyond trigger, and they're going to come back and review all this in history, right? Like saying the PDB, the president got it here. You knew this, boom, boom, boom. Pottinger told him this, bang, bang, bang. You see them. They're going to review their thing too. And they're just not moving the ball forward as helping the country think this through. They keep talking about pulling the country together. They are actually not just tearing it apart. They're in some sort of cul-de-sac where they can't pull out of, and the Trump derangement syndrome is now a real thing, and you can see it. You can see it in the way that question was asked. That question was asked just to trigger, not to get to the key point that, hey, you are wartime president. They're casualties. And quite frankly, there are a lot of casualties, right? And now we know that there's going to be more casualties than you guys have said at the low end. What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, no, and I mean, the media culture is such a gotcha. I mean, literally, if President Trump came out and said, we have developed the vaccine, here it is, the immediate thing is, well, this isn't going to work. This hasn't been proven, this hasn't been tested. Even if he literally had the magic formula, and there's an op-ed, I tweeted out a little bit ago, do it again for a moment for the listeners, but Josh Disbrow, who's the CEO of A2 Bioscience, has an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today, and he starts off, I ran an obscure pharmaceutical company until a few days ago. Then we got famous. And basically he goes through, he has this devices technology that's going through FDA approval called Heal Light, where they insert it into the breathing tube of an intubated patient. And this is the whole the ultraviolet light treatment for COVID-19. And they say then everyone started going nuts. They were actually working in conjunction with Cedars-Sinai in LA to actually go and test this out. This was not some make-believe thing. But then YouTube takes their video down. Then Vimeo does. Then Twitter suspends their account. Then the narrative change, I'm quoting from the story now, from whether UV light can be used to treat it to A2 is being censored. And he basically says that there's still much work to do on this, but now it's gotten so political just because of this Trump thing. And again, this is a guy, CEO of a bioscience company, A2 Bioscience, doing this with Cedars-Sinai.
Look, this is what we said the other day. In the convergence of this, on the therapy side, you should have 200, 500 things inside the apparatus, just like at DARPA. The military has hundreds and thousands of projects and research projects, some of which will never amount to anything. Folks, it shouldn't be lost on you that the Navy, and having been a former naval officer and an aide to the Chief of Naval Operations of the Pentagon, I will tell you, Navy pilots, they do not put out the videos on UFOs lightly, okay? This is a big event, okay? And I'm not some guy with a tinfoil hat. My point is
that did look like. By the way, that did look like Crooked coming back, didn't it? You could just hear the music from the Wizard of Oz, dun, 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 like coming on the broomstick.
We can't give it up.
No.
So great if Biden got traded out for her. Be the last. You talk about the last dance. That would be the last dance. Come on, be epic, my girl. No, but even in DARPA, they've got stuff there, the advanced stuff, and some of it never comes to fruition. But here they talk about, and this is what I said the other day. In a small moment of that, I said this: "Hey, they ought to be looking at." Some guy cut the video right before I said the whole thing, so it looked like I was agreeing that go drink the Clorox, right? But this CEO, this is what I'm saying. To move it forward, we know we have to have mass therapeutics because we may never have a vaccine. We also know we have to have mass testing and the antibodies testing, and it's totally imperfect right now. But in all war, it's imperfect. If CNN and MSNBC had been around in World War II, after our North Africa campaign, that would have been it. We would never gone after the Germans. The North African campaign was such a debacle. Kasserine passes were Patton and those guys got traded out for the first generals we had, and we sent the troops over too early. They were too green. The junior officers and the NCOs weren't ready, and we got wiped out in North Africa, right? It was a slaughter of American troops. If the media had been around today, like MSNBC and CNN, we'd never gotten to Italy. We'd have never gotten to Normandy, right? Because the whole thing, the nation would have been so depressed because they would have picked it apart.
They would have tried to impeach him for Pearl Harbor.
Exactly. The commission would have come right up.
And one of the things that's most important with the comparison with war is you have to be able to adapt to the changing battlefield, right? Remember at the start of World War I, we were getting decimated by the German U-boats. We didn't even turn off the lights on our coasts. We lost 1/3 of all tankers on planet Earth in 1941-42.
This pivots right to my point about the adapting. And now we know, and Jack Max has been beating the drum on this from day one, the nursing homes that in the mass on point strategy, all therapeutics, including outside the box stuff that may not be right forever, the UV guy, but you know that it's a Cedars-Sinai, which is the top. If you're on the West Coast, that are the pros from Dover. They're working on some long-range thing, and they're doing some tests right there, mass therapeutics, mass testing, mass antibodies, plus in the sequestering of the target audience here, which is obviously the aged and comorbidities and minorities. That's how you open it up. And that's how you pivot. You got to make adjustments. But they're on him nonstop, right? And just won't even get to the next level. Here's my point: is that the coverage is so bad because there's so many issues, and we're a tiny organization, but there's so many issues with their money and their platforms. You could get to very serious analysis of this that would actually unite the country and take it forward, even with the mistakes. And there are going to be mistakes made. It's a war. We know very little about this virus today, right? Well, all we know is that it's got different aspects and different elements. It mutates. We got Nobel Prize winners saying, "Hey, it's a bomb they made in they got HIV. And it's a bomb they made in the lab." We got other guys saying, "No, it is the wet market. It came out of a bat cave." We know very little about it, but that's why. And I think yesterday, the Newsy quote with him actually admitting, "Hey, the model was not correct because the models are going to change," right?
I also, we have to get into the psychology behind all of this and the briefings themselves. Yesterday's briefing was in the Rose Garden, not just because it was a tolerable day, but because the Rose Garden, the White House can configure the seating. You can't do that in the briefing room. So you've got CNN at the back of the room. You've got Olivia Nuzzi at the back in the Rose Garden, where you can't do that in the press briefing room. But the reason these guys are partly asking their questions, yes, their bosses are telling them to do it as well. Yes, they're never Trumpers. But also there's this psychological game playing out right now. The will he, won't he hold a press conference. And the reporters can't decide in their own minds whether they want him to do it or don't want him to do it. If he doesn't do it, they get to attack him as being afraid. We saw that over the course of the weekend. If he does it, they get to ask those snarky questions.
And it goes back to the thing where every single person in that audience or in the briefing room is working on a book or is being told they need to work on a book.
And you go and sell a book by asking snarky questions. We'll be right back into the war room in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
You have a pandemic, that's the pestilence. You have an economic crisis, that's the economic collapse. You have a financial crisis, now liquidity and solvency, although the market's starting to come back, the equity market. Then you have the geopolitics of it all. That is the war that we're in with the Chinese Communist Party, and it is a war. And then you have the politics of it all. Those 5 elements, those 5 verticals, those 5 pathways is the only way you can think about this. And this is why we're saying the mainstream media, nobody does a show like this. And the reason is that number one, most of them are not that bright, but they have the production apparatus around them, zuckering these guys. You owe it to the nation to start to pull this together, and so people can start to understand it. You can disaggregate it and then think about the pieces and then how they tie together. Okay, let's go back to the Rose Garden. Look, we're not the Brett Bozell. We're not here to critique the media, right? Andrew was the best. Andrew Breitbart was the single best guy ever to do that. And at Breitbart, we did pivot away from just let's get into the populist nationalist hard news aspect of it. Andrew's the best. So we're not just media critics, but there's something here. Part of this is McLuhan asking the fact that the information, remember, the CCP's in an information war with us every day. The information element of this is quite important. And obviously the president, Trump is president, one of the reasons is because he's a tremendous communicator, particularly to a mass audience. He understands how to speak in a non-political vernacular, right? And so let's go back to the Rose Garden here. So let's do this back and forth with him, and then let's get into the fact of what's the reality and talk about the open.
In the back.
If an American president loses more Americans over the course of 6 weeks than died in the entirety of the Vietnam War, does he deserve to be reelected?
So, yeah, we've lost a lot of people, but if you look at what original projections were, 2.2 million, we're probably heading to 60,000, 70,000. It's far too many. One person is too many for this. And I think we've made a lot of really good decisions. The big decision was closing the border or doing the ban, people coming in from China, obviously other than American citizens, which had to come in. Can't say you can't come in, you can't come back to your country. I think we've made a lot of good decisions. I think that Mike Pence and the task force have done a fantastic job. I think that everybody working on the ventilators, you see what we've done there, have done unbelievable. The press doesn't talk about ventilators anymore. They just don't want to talk about them, and that's okay. But the reason they don't want to talk, that was a subject that nobody would get off of. They don't want to talk about them. We're in the same position on testing. We are lapping the world on testing, and the world.
So that's President Trump answering Olivia Nuzzi's question, which I've actually seen some left of center, well, they call themselves journalists, they're not really journalists, but left of center folks on Twitter going after President Trump for not reacting in a more angry fashion towards that question. Like, wait, you blow up people for lesser questions than that. Why didn't you get more mad or angry? You give a very level, you could tell that was one he was waiting for it to come across the plate so he could crush it.
Do you think he was waiting for it, or he just knew he's got real gravitas? That answer was gravitas. Whether you like all the component elements of it and think he could have done it better, that was the nastiest question that's been asked of all these nasty questions. That's the sharpest. That because you could say, we've said this many times. More in 6. Now you're passing the civilian casualties in the Civil War. Now you're doing this. Now you're doing that. But deserved to be president was that's what she put the blade in, right?
But he didn't take the bait.
He didn't take the bait and came back in a very, I thought, pure gravitas. Hey, I hear you. Let's think about it this way, right? Boom. It would have been 2.2 million. It's 60, and guess what? It's probably going to be 70.
While the media tries to define blame, I think we have to recognize what exactly are the president's responsibilities. What can he do? He can't go into California and grab Newsom by the wrist and tell him to do something. He can close down the borders. He can shut air traffic to China. He can begin ramping up the federal response. But he is not responsible for what goes on in these individual states. And something that I think is very, very important for our listeners to understand. It looks like probably 40% of our casualties in this war are going to come from people who should have been protected inside state long-term care facilities and local long-term care facilities. There's a huge divide between the publicly run ones and the privately run ones. We understand there's obviously economic issues there as well. But, I mean, just to go through some of this stuff, I mean, they're talking about how the president is responsible of this. California long-term care facilities, 33% of the total. Colorado, 40% of the total. Massachusetts, 64% of the total. Which state officials were responsible for guarding these vulnerable people in places where they should have been
Let's go back to this. In the very first days of this, when and I got to tell you, got to give a hat tip, I think, to Inslee. The very first days of this, remember, it came and it was Seattle, Washington, and Washington was it's that healthcare center there. The federal government, the president did change. Remember, immediately they talked about nursing homes. Boom, certain of the regulations were going to change. Okay, I don't know what the details of that. We had looked at, but they changed certain things immediately. But instantly, those guys very much focused immediately, and this shows you people that are on it. And it's not we're not the mainstream media. We're not trying to point blame to Phil Murphy and to Governor Cuomo. They got a tough enough job. But there's going to have to be some sort of investigation later. What happened to these nursing homes? And I heard, and there's all kind of stuff going around. Some was the policies that you had to take to people. You had to do this. The one in New Jersey, I know Phil's torn apart. You can see on these press conferences, the one where they found the 17 bodies. I think they got 69 clearly. And this is what's so key about this about the reopening. You've got to sequester. You have to put high priorities. You can probably open up the rest of the country and do it some logical way where eventually people are not wearing masks and not sitting 6 feet apart, and you got football stadiums that if you target and do smart sequestering of the elderly. And my problem with the elderly in this situation, I gave this speech, and so you were up there in Scranton at Right to Life breakfast, the annual breakfast, 1,000 people, most tickets they'd ever sold, just saying. And I said at the time, this is like this is in February. And I come out and say, hey, this pandemic, which people are saying, what are you talking about? I said, this pandemic is coming, is going to be a right to life issue. You guys are all about the thing. The biggest issue I think you've gotten right to life now, because the technology is showing young people when birth actually happens, right? Conception happens. The biggest issues in Europe is this assisted suicide, end of life, warehousing, and hey, you're too costly, et cetera. I said the big issue, remember that. I said the big issue is going to be, because this is going to hit the elderly, is going to be, hey, the cost-benefit analysis that it's just not worth it. And if we lose that aspect of the Judeo-Christian West, right, that our elderly are not the people, and that Pence's most eloquent moment is when he said, hey, these are the guys that coach us in Little League, these are the guys. And remember, on that stage that day, where a bishop and the other guy, the executive director, that both had parents, and I topped him. I hated to Bigfoot him, but I have a 98-year-old dad, right? So I had to Bigfoot him.
Yeah, and I want to go to this point about the Inslee versus Cuomo, because this actually is starting to get a decent amount of attention and percolating up. So I want to just break down New York just real quick, because they had their first diagnosed case on March 1st. Cuomo declared a state of emergency on March 7th, and then the stay-at-home order wasn't until March 22nd. So you see kind of the several-week gap there.
Hold it, but this is where the mainstream media, look, Governor Cuomo, I think, has done a very good job, but to know that's in March and February, dude, they're blowing into JFK like this is why he stopped the flights from China in January.
Trump, yeah, that was January 30th when he put the smackdown. There's actually former CDC director Tom Frieden. So that's not Tom Friedman, the New York Times.
No, Frieden's the famous guy under Obama. Yeah.
Right, he's the
Ebola guy.
Yes, he also used to run the New York City Health Department.
Big time.
He said, and this was a couple of weeks ago, and I'd actually missed this. Maybe we talked about it on the show, but he said that if New York had acted 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks. So again, we're talking March 7th. So at that point, even after they'd had their first case,
that's end of February.
So at March 7th, when Cuomo came out and declared a state of emergency, if he had issued the stay-at-home order at that point, still waiting 2 more weeks, 80% reduction in the number of deaths in New York, and that's from an Obama CDC guy, Tom Frieden. 80%,
and the former New York City guy,
former New York City guy,
80%.
80%.
And this has been a debate. Okay, he also says something. Jump in here for 1 second. I got to get this in before I forget it. He said something yesterday. One of the reasons I want to get to this, and it was in not response to the president's PDB of January, but he made a comment yesterday that said, out of Cuomo's lips, December. We knew about this in December. Whoa. What do you mean by that, brother? You knew about it in December, and you're not moving until March? That is, like I said, there's enough. This is war. Mistakes are going to be made. It's in the fog of war. It's all of that. And so, but right here with Governor Cuomo, who they're saying the press conference is so good, this guy should replace Biden. We were very complimentary. We were doing the WABC show during the height of it to him. And he's done actually a hands-on job. But hey, no offense. They're all over Trump. Hey, you saw the PDB thing. Oh, they got the PDB, and now they got the Daily Mail's got the biggest story. They get the lead. Pottinger told you should have done Europe right away. How about Cuomo?
I have a question. Does somebody who has presided over more deaths in a state than there were in the American Revolutionary War deserve to be governor of New York? No. What I'm saying is, if Newsy wants to be cute about this, right, that can be leveled at all sorts of people.
Let's compare and contrast. Let's compare and contrast Inslee, because Inslee's the president is no fan of Inslee. Where he's giving praise to Cuomo, he's saying the guy's a snake, right? He told Pence, "What are you flying out there for?" The guy's a snake. Inslee in Seattle, right? The first guys, they were the original hot zone, and that thing could have exploded. And I realize it's a different density figure. There's everybody out there. You got, what do they call it? They call it the Seattle freeze. Everybody, it's the stare. Yeah, everybody, they got a thing called the Seattle freeze. When you go up to people, they're all kind of give you the, yeah, nice, get out of here, right? It's like the cool kids in high school, right? They give you the nice smile, but they kind of move on.
Do I do that?
No, you don't, because
Okay.
you're not.
I've been gone too long.
You've gone too long.
Yeah.
You're old school Seattle. You're Seattle pilots, right? You're downtown. Was it downtown Scotty Brown? Who was the downtown?
That was downtown Freddie Brown. It was
Downtown
Sonics.
Freddie
That
Brown.
was a
Sonics, I know,
Yeah.
the ball player, but that's saying old school. Be back in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Episode 144. Let's go to it. How are we going to unlock this? And how is Abbott and DeWine, right, are going to be the lead sled dogs here? Kemp, I got that, but that's a sideshow. The two main events here are Texas and Ohio. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And that will drive also the upper Midwest Democratic governors, et cetera, to get focused on, hey, here's these two guys doing it. Big, complicated states.
Yeah, and look, I'd say that Governor DeWine really does embody that Midwest working values. He just keeps his head down. You don't hear much about him. Obviously, he's been a guest here in War Room Pandemic, but he just gets it done.
He's a perfect fourth turning type, a guy who's been around forever. Nobody ever paid attention to, right? Just kind of below the radar, really below the radar, that in a crisis steps up with just being practical and pragmatic, low-key, and just getting things done.
Yeah, and I mean, and clearly with Governor Abbott in Texas, who's doing a fantastic job as well, you are seeing the groundwork here for a 2024 campaign.
So what did the president actually lay out yesterday? The big news and the reason they had the press briefing, and I don't think they really went into the cabinet room for his meeting with the CEOs. I think they had a small gaggle, but not a thing we thought it would actually be the cameras rolling the entire time and showing him in action. He decided to go to the Rose Garden and do a press briefing. The whole tee-up was we're laying out the plan. So walk us through what the plan was, and do you think it was appropriately or laid out in the level of detail or with the what I call muzzle velocity that you want?
Well, and yesterday it went back and forth. Was there going to be a press or not going to be one? And by the way, the president just announced that he's going to be having a press conference with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis at the White House here at 11:30. So that's coming up in just about an hour. So yesterday they had the cameras come in when he was doing his working group meeting. Was that in the Roosevelt room? Is that where they brought him in?
I thought that was in the cabinet room.
Was it in the cabinet room?
I thought
okay.
it was cabinet room.
Then cabinet room. So they bring him in, and so there really wasn't anything. President was there, kind of had his arms folded, wasn't too psyched about the cameras, and they told him to get it.
Arms folded across from Azar. Didn't look like he was having fun, right? By the way, Azar's on the team. Just want you to know that, right? You're not going anywhere, dude.
Exactly.
Don't be book deal Alex, right? Don't go be selling your book yet.
But then they had the Rose Garden a press conference a little bit later. They laid out basically a 3-stage testing plan that largely, to kind of sum it up, largely it hands it down to the states, which again, that is how our healthcare is administered. It is done at the state level. You might not like it, but that is the reality of how we have 50 different healthcare structures in the U.S. So stage 1 is the launch. Stage 2 is scale. Stage 3 is supporting and opening up again. They talk about some of the core elements of the testing plan, the robust diagnostic testing plan, the timely monitoring system, the rapid response program. And they go through with a little bit more detail for each of the stage 1, the stage 2, the stage 3. And there are some graphs and things like that, but it didn't quite have the punch, so to speak. The main takeaway is that 2%, approximately 2%, and this goes to the point I made yesterday about the testing. We're never going to have 100% testing. I mean, just this notion that I think people think you got to have 100% testing to be able to reopen the U.S. We're never going to have it. What they laid out yesterday, here's how we get to 2% testing of the population as soon as possible.
What more details would you have liked to see?
Well, I think that they're acknowledging at this point, and you particularly saw that with Dr. Birx, who I think has been a very good kind of calming influence in this whole thing. And the idea is that a test is only a snapshot in time, right? A negative test today could be a positive test tomorrow. So the antibody testing, I think, probably reveals more than anything out there. And I think that, we're going to have what they say, 6 million, the ability to do 6 million tests a week in like another couple of weeks. So I have no doubt that we're going to get to the point, but I still think, and I think this is the thing that everybody has to understand, we have to adapt to this new enemy amongst us. I mean, you have to almost think of this virus as if it's a terrorist living inside the country, and we have to adapt and be prepared for bad things to happen, but we don't need to hide in our holes, I don't think, forever.
Well, let's talk about that. In DeWine and Abbott, what's the plans for Abbott's actually announcing new things like movie theaters, right? DeSantis is clearly up here today to talk about how he's going to open up Florida, right, in a smart way.
Yeah, and when you look on a per capita, I mean, Florida's death rate is really low. I mean, they just recently crossed over 1,000. I think they might be at 1,300 deaths for the statewide.
Particularly with their aged population. We talked about it. This had gotten up to the villages, right, on I-4. I mean, or down in the
condo towers.
Towers down in South Florida. I mean, DeSantis is this is another governor. It looks like he's separated himself out.
I will tell you, other than spring break, and Governor DeSantis, he should have shut down spring break. Other than that, I think he's handled this pretty darn smoothly.
Yeah.
And I think when you go back and say who are the good guys and who handled their states really well, I think DeSantis is going to be right there near the top. But look, Abbott has it starting on Friday. Movie theaters will open up in addition to restaurants and retail and museums. I mean, it's coming along here.
Now they're also, I noticed that when they talk about the retail going out, they're putting that back on the entrepreneurs in the corporations to set their own rules. I haven't seen, and maybe I'm missing it, but when I went through, I haven't seen state procedures for temperature taking or the liability or anything like that. They are allowing right now in doing this. They're giving overall guidance, but they're not getting to the level of specificity of telling a business how you actually have to open, correct?
We might see that coming because OSHA just passed some guidelines for the meatpacking industry that's been really devastated with the COVID-19. And their guidelines are kind of loose, but they say require that all workers maintain a 6-foot social separation, that everybody get temperature checked when they go in the door, and that everybody wear face masks. Now, also interestingly, there was a guy on from Walmart today, and he said that they have been slowly introducing plans as they understand more and more about this virus. And so now when you arrive at work at Walmart, you're going to go to the back of the store. There's going to be somebody there in PPEs. They're going to ask you 5 questions. They're going to take your temperature. If you're under 100.
As an employee.
As an employee. If you're under 100 degrees Fahrenheit, they'll let you go to work.
So let's go now. Let's pivot for a second and go to our famine and to our food security. Since you jumped in here, OSHA had to come up with this because there's been an explosion of hotspots right around, particularly the meatpacking industry. How did that come about? We just had Sonny Perdue, and I imagine the president's going to get him back up here pretty quickly because this is percolating in the media now that we have a food security problem and we have a food supply chain problem. And when you're seeing on the popular sites of Daily Mail and the New York Post, where chicken, meat, and now fish is going to be scarce. This is the way people start getting freaked out, right? So let's go back to what the problem is. I want to talk about the global potential for famine, right? Number one, it shouldn't be lost to anybody. The Chinese are now stepping up to on phase 1 of the deal. They're buying, right?
They are buying.
So if they're buying, if the CCP's buying, right? Do you want to be selling? So what's going? How did this break out into, particularly in South Dakota and some of these places, Iowa, that had very hands off? How did all of a sudden we get this concentration of these hot zones, mini New York cities in these plants?
Well, one of the things you have to understand, these meatpacking plants were necessary businesses, so they never shut down. They kept going at full capacity. We've got to feed America. The other thing is, for the most part, in many of these places, they're made up of very strong immigrant communities. Hispanics, certainly in Iowa and Minnesota, many of the plant workers are recent immigrants from Somalia, places like that. So we're seeing for example, just in the regular United States, there's a higher proportion of infections among Hispanic Americans than there are in others. So they're having problems, but they've got to get back to work.
Did these businesses have social separation, like you heard in the financial community and all these other businesses? If you were not working from home, if you were essential and went in, you had regulations immediately for social separation. One of the criticisms is, were these companies, Smithfield and these other companies, Iowa beef packers, did they immediately go to some logical separation, or were they not concerned about their employees' safety and the customer safety and have everybody packed in working?
I don't know that they weren't concerned. We have to remember, just as you've said many times, we've been getting our arms around this. People didn't necessarily understand the infection rate. We certainly didn't understand the fact that half your employees at the plant could be positive and not show any symptoms.
The asymptomatic part was a big deal.
The asymptomatic is a huge problem. Now,
Walmart's got to remember that. You walk in, you have a temperature that's under 100. It doesn't mean – listen, I'm not saying it's a weapon, but all I'm saying is this thing's got 30 different mutations already. One of the things that continues to concern the experts is how this thing's asymptomatic for so long when you may be in the most infectious. We don't know this for a fact yet, but people are saying this may be the most infectious when you're asymptomatic. That makes this thing a pure demon.
Well, I'll tell you, even yesterday when I was getting my foot x-rayed and I walk in and they do the temperature check when I was going to the doctor's office, and she's like, okay, you're 97. Okay, good. And then you're fine. And then moves on. I kind of paused for a second. I was like, actually, you don't know if I'm fine at all. It just, because my temperature was low. That's just, this is not a.
That's the insidious nature of this thing.
Yeah, you didn't stick one of those swabs into my brain. You just did my temperature.
After I saw that video with the soldier, dude, I am not. You see, they get this video going around the internet
I've
right
had
now.
It.
Yeah, no, but dude, I said, hey, I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for it.
Look at the great history of this country. Being an American has obviously one of the greatest honors that a human being on this planet can have. But it comes with risk, right? It comes with risk being American. Being free is a risky venture, and I think it's worth it.
So let's go now. That, by the way, we're gonna have the John Wayne thing playing in the background. We got our Jack Maxey moment for this morning. Go back to let's go from the sublime to the less sublime. Let's go back to a meatpacking plant in Iowa.
Let's talk about this. We are down 1/3 in pork production, and what people don't realize is, if I'm a pork breeder, right? They're talking to a guy in Minnesota. He had to euthanize 3,000 piglets. Actually, for some people, might really bum out. They actually abort them. They give the sows an injection, and then they abort the babies. But this is happening all across the thing. And the problem with the meat industry, I can't sell an undersized hog just to get him off my property if I wanted to, because the construction of the abattoirs is such that they accept certain size carcasses into the machinery. So there's real problems all across the board. And Canada, for example, exports about 20% of live hogs to the United States for processing. They're not able to export any of them now. We're killing millions of chickens right now in Delaware and New Jersey because we can't get them to the market. And interestingly, just for the first time in Brazil, they shut down a massive plant down there. And this is something that I didn't know. I was looking into this. I had some assumptions. But together, the United States and Brazil are responsible for 65% of all the meat processing in the world.
Brazil and the United States are a superpower when it comes to agriculture and food
I
production.
agree.
You combine those two in some sort of OPEC. They've talked about that when Bolsonaro's guys first came up about some sort of OPEC between the United States and Brazil is getting organized on how you actually get prices correct and production.
That's why JBS is so critical. That's the meat company, and they have JBS US. But that's they've had a whole bunch of issues with the government and things like that. But it's it's a powerhouse company.
Yes, that mad cow meat is looking pretty good right now.
Listen, one of the things that as all this gets investigated, one of the things that's going to come up is this swine flu that was in China back in the summer of 2019 that killed half of the hog population. This is a population, when they eat meat, they're not eating beef, they're eating pork. It is a pork-driven diet to the degree that they get that type of protein. And so this is a huge aspect. That's why this thing right now, I think it will change American dietary habits. I'm not sure Vish's those hot dogs he makes, grills up every couple of days. We're going to have
couple of hours.
every couple of hours. Vish and Greg are the.
Is this a bill? I know we don't give stock advice here, but is this a rush out and get yourself some Beyond Meat?
Well, I think it will change.
don't.
I think it's going to have to change dietary habits. You've got a third. This is going to go to 50% of the stuff's going to start getting dialed down.
And
Plus the
it's
6 feet
harming
separation.
Truckers, it's harming everyone.
Well, the truckers are essential. When we come back, I want to talk about the famine part of it worldwide. We're going to get into is this another horseman in the apocalypse and how it can be handled next on War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Governor Ron DeSantis will be at the White House with President Trump at 11:30. We'll be bringing you all the breaking news about that as the nation gets ready to the opening day kickoff May 1st. Texas, Ohio, looks like Florida, different aspects. I think there are 14 states that are going to do various elements of it. You can go down and get a tattoo. John Fredericks, I think the John Fredericks Radio Network's broadcasting live from Georgia.
Is he going to get a tattoo?
I think he's getting a back tattoo. I think he's getting a back tattoo, and I'll support and pay for anything as long as he doesn't put any more workout videos.
Look, if you're going to be the Godzilla of truth, you need a back tattoo.
You got to.
Well, listen, I got to tell a little anecdote about John Fredericks from a week ago. You know, John's on fire. And I'm outside talking on the telephone. He says, I got to talk to you. We got to open this up. This is crazy. And I said, hang on, John, hang on. He goes, listen. He goes, I just got one thing to say. He goes, if it was about safety, he goes, why did they send me to Vietnam? He goes, I spent a whole year there, and it was quite dangerous. And he goes, my plan was to shelter in place with my girlfriend.
John Fredericks, unbelievable. Let's go
Great
to
American.
Let's get back to the series. All this discussion, when you've got the American food supply chain now under some sort of question, and I'm sure former Governor Perdue is now Secretary of Agriculture, is going to be back up in front of the microphones over the next couple of days to put that to rest and to talk in detail about why this food supply is not in jeopardy. Internationally, there's clearly something going on, right? And number one, you still got a massive problem in China. As we started the show back in January, one of the very first things we focused on was people saying that when the Chinese, they had a huge problem with they had to get the spring planting in. And under no circumstances, remember in China, you've got about 300 million migrants that shift from mines to fields to the farthest down the food chain as far as it goes on labor. And if you don't have those migrants out in the fields, and at that time, remember, it was a big question, like, where have they, right? Do we have control of them? We know they're not sheltering in place. What's going to happen to that? So that was a huge issue with China. It looks like from all reports, they have gotten the spring planting done, but there's still a huge question there. And that's one of the reasons they're stepping up and buying pork like crazy right now is what's going on with this. Where do we stand right now throughout the world with this issue of famine?
Well, it's a very interesting comment was made just a few days ago by Elizabeth Burrs, and she works for the UN for the World Food Program. And she said it's not just a supply problem such as drought or locusts, which we have, or a demand side issue such as a recession. It's both at the same time and on a global scale. So what we're having around the world is a difficulty with transport for everything from oil to commodities, grains, beef, pork. And so what we're looking at, particularly in the vulnerable Horn of Africa, going into this, we looked like we probably had about 22 million people, certainly up in northeast portion of Africa, that were going to be in danger of famine. And this was largely because of a second-year persistent drought, but also, and I don't want to set anyone's hair on fire, there is the worst locust swarming going on right now in
not to get too biblical, but you've got a pestilence, you got a plague, you've got locusts.
I think
right?
We said this like on show 5 or 10. Remember, we were saying, listen, there's one thing that we know is going to follow pestilence. It's going to be famine, right? Because you're going to lock down the globe and put things into difficulty. And some of the things that we're not really even thinking about, like how do we get fertilizer to the fields, right? If we lose, say, 10% production in global agriculture, that has a much bigger impact than anyone can believe. And they just had the agricultural minister of Russia speaking yesterday, and he said they're very worried about what they perceive as a second year of drought. Germany is talking about this as well. So we could look at lower grain production. We're seeing around the world a shortage of flour inside the retail market. Now, I want to make clear to everybody, it's not that we don't have enough food. It's that we don't have the ability to get the food where it needs to go necessarily.
This is a structural problem we have because, remember, institutional buyers, you have photos of dumping the milk out in Wisconsin. You have food rotting. And the reason is so much of ours goes to schools, goes to colleges, goes to universities, goes to all the institutions, the restaurants. And right now, the restaurants, the takeout business, I'm hearing rule of thumb is 20% of what their normal 4 turns a day was.
And it's interesting.
And so institutionally, you got to restructure the food distribution.
Just inside the U.S., there are 2 parallel food production processes, right? There's the same guys making Gold Seal flour in a 2-pound bag for your grandmother, but they're selling the majority of it in 50-pound bags to restaurants and bakeries and things like that. So how did they change the scale from 50 down to supply more 2-pound bags? It's a difficult problem. And where it's going to get really heady, I think, is particularly in the third world, in Latin America, and particularly in Africa, because as you've seen these countries close down their borders, it makes it very difficult to get
Go to Brazil for a
forth.
second. Brazil's our partner in being an economic powerhouse. Now, Bolsonaro has had he's Sweden to the 10th power. He said, hey, it's nothing but a common cold, and just and have at it. Now, they're starting to change it. His health minister resigned. There's a big controversy down there. But they've had some problems already. You're seeing they're starting to show some problems in their food production supply chain, right?
They're having a problem with an abattoir down there as well. They had to close it down yesterday. It looks like they'll get it back up. I know Brazil has been a country that everybody loves to hammer, but if you look at the actual deaths per 100,000, which seems to be the international standard, Brazil is at a 2.0. So that's pretty good compared to Belgium's 63 and the U.S. is 17. But Brazil is a necessary thing. I would love to see, Steve, you and I have talked about this many times. I'd love to see one of the results that comes out of this is a tighter relationship between Brazil and the United States, because not only do we have an obligation
if we can
morally
keep
to feed the
Bolsonaro,
world,
if we can keep Bolsonaro in office, I'm telling you, he's taking incoming right now because
I think he's going to get reelected.
I'm not saying reelected. They're going to move to impeach him. This is the next. They impeached Trump. They're going to move on Bolsonaro. I can tell you, they're all over this guy right now. We'll get in maybe more details. We'll talk about the geopolitics. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back top of the hour. We're going to try to get Curtis Ellis in. Curtis has got a new boycott China program. Talk about the president yesterday kind of dropped a bomb in the middle of the thing, talking about they're looking at making the CCP start to pay for this. So this is all next. Hashtag war and pandemic. Observations, questions, news. You've been giving us some great leads. About 20% of what you sent, I have the staff look up and follow up. Great comments, great analysis, great news. Also on Facebook, go to Facebook. We have people to review all the comments, particularly when you send something and say, "Hey, you guys are missing this. Get on top of this." The Bill Gates feedback I got yesterday for follow-on investigations and drill down were absolutely amazing. People are woke. We're going to return with the entire team. Governor DeSantis, president at the White House. Next hour of War Room Pandemic. Be back in a moment.